What's going on, Dragons? Happy Wednesday. As always, I'm your co-host, Cory, and welcome to episode 48 of the Urcast, our weekly conversation about all things Magic the Gathering. Joining me this week, back from the big city, the Big Apple, the metropolis of the East Coast, we have Cole on his return from New York City.
What's up, everybody? I was living the Spider-Man lifestyle up in New York, and haven't purchased a single Spider-Man card yet, but having a lot of fun, Happy to be back. So
You're not web slinging your way through like a mountain of collector boosters at your house. Like you've built a Manhattan out of collector boxes, and you're swinging your way through the living room.
too rich for my blood, but maybe on the Avatar set.
Sure,
I win the lottery.
We are also joined in the den by fellow Commander podcaster and the brewmeister of the internet, the co-host of Brew It or Screw It. We have Cody in the house.
Ooh, that's an old name. It's Brew Review nowadays. How you doing?
My god. Oh my god, I failed. I'm a horrible host.
Cole, it sounds like you might have been preparing for the next New York set, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Yeah, I'm doubling down. I was doing a little bit of research for the podcast.
Get in the sewers, seeing what's going on. I understand.
New York is the most quintessential Magic plane there is.
Hey, they brought back blocks. We had the Spider-Man block. We have Ninja Turtle block. Where are we going next? Ghostbusters?
Oh, that would be so terrible. Well, no, they had Ghostbusters already.
It did? Oh, I did. You're right. Secret Lair. Yeah.
Okay, wait. So before we get into the topic of today's episode, I got to ask you. So you mentioned Secret Lair. Last week, I had to do a little heat check on Brian about the Furby Secret Lair, and he was not sold. Where are we at? Because I said it was possibly the greatest Secret Lair turnabout I've experienced. What's the heat check on Furby?
So Lads and I were discussing this on the last episode. I'm okay with Furby. I think it was The Office that kind of was like, okay, come on, guys. What are we doing?
Jump the shark a little bit?
Jump the shark a little bit.
Jump the shark? You mean Jaws?
Ooh. Hey, I bought that one. I'm fine with that one.
Yeah, I was cool with that too.
I don't mind when they do these kind of Universe Beyond Secret Layers. I do think there is something to be said about like kind of keeping it like fantasy-esque, Like a Furby is it's a weird fantasy creature, totally fine. I loved the little horror versions, like the Umbrus one that they did, where like it's like a Furby with like a mouth in its stomach. That was sick. Love that one.
Which 100% was the one that sold me, because when I saw the Furby like teaser that it was going to come out, I wasn't sold, and then I saw the horror set, and I was like, okay, I'm sold. 100%, I'm all in now.
Yeah, but it was the Office one where I was like, all right, guys, come on, that's a real person. What are y'all doing?
Well, you say The Office, but it was strictly Dwight Schrute.
Dwight,
at least
Dwight.
Throw me a Michael Scott as a
you don't want a Jim?
Yeah, I do want a Jim. If I'm going all in on The Office, give me a
They should have done a whole Secret Lair that was all clones, and it was all Jim as clones, and it was all just like identity theft is a crime, Jim.
That would have been funny.
Okay, anyways, before we get too sidetracked, this week, we're going to be talking about deck archetypes that we feel every deck brewer should try. So if you're new to brewing, this is going to be the episode you want to listen to. And if you're a little bit of a old school veteran who has a couple card sleeves under their belt, you maybe also want to give it a listen and hopefully take something away from it. So we have 6 archetypes we're going to be discussing today. With all of those, we're going to talk about kind of why we feel like these are the quintessential 6 that you should be looking into, what you can take away from it, and kind of what tools you could take from that to then apply to future deck builds. And we have also each brought our own commander recommendations to go along with it. So we'll talk about the archetype, give our like 2-3 sentence elevator pitch on why our commander is the best and the other 2 persons' commanders suck, and hopefully we'll spark some creative juices and get you guys up on Arcadeck or Moxfield or wherever you feel like doodling your commander deck and give you some cool, awesome ideas. So, gentlemen, are we ready to talk brewing?
I'm ready.
All right. So I thought the best way we could kind of start this conversation, because we each have different perspectives, we each have different kind of histories brewing decks, is if we could take 2 seconds, maybe define your play style, maybe give a little back history on, hey, you've been brewing decks for so long, or these are the kind of decks you typically brew, and just kind of set the mood for where your opinions are coming from. So Cody, as the guest, I'm going to put you in the limelight and make you set the tone.
All right. Totally fair. I've been brewing for 3 years. That's how long I've been playing Magic. I played other card games before that, so I kind of have like an idea in mind whenever I got into Magic. In Yu-Gi-Oh, back in the day, like it was always like a group of creatures, like elemental heroes. There was these like weird fox creatures that like all synergize together. So Typal was like one of the first things that drew me to Magic. Like, oh, I can just run a bunch of goblins and they work. Cool. Like when I wanted to play Magic, I want to say like 10 years ago, I told my buddy, I was like, "Hey, if you're going to teach me, I want to play goblins." He played a control stacks deck against me that I know now is a control stacks deck. Was not the intro I needed, so I went away for 10 years. And then 3
Sure.
years ago, I got into it. I would say I don't play combo. I just don't like it. I don't find it fun for the table. I think I'm more of a mid-range. Like I love combat. Like I love turning creatures sideways. I like big splashy plays. Like my favorite play is to get a Chandra's Ignition on a huge creature and kill the table. One of my favorite. But yeah, I think that would kind of describe me as a brewer. I'm trying to mainly win through combat, pumping up creatures, things like that.
Okay, I respect that. I also came from the Yu-Gi-Oh background, so it is kind of funny because it's like the same but different. Because when you think Typal and Magic, you're thinking like goblins, elves, dragons, like very
Yeah.
much like the literal type line or creature type on the card. Whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh, they're like exclusively in the name. So you see less like, hey, all warriors get this. You see more like elemental heroes or Watts or cyber dragons get blah, 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 you know? So it's kind of an interesting just transition.
Any creatures with blue eyes in their name have this
Blue
like ability.
eyes, red eyes, black, dragon chick, and all that kind of stuff. All right, Cole, I think you are the most experienced deck builder at the table right now. So what are your insights?
Yeah. So I've been playing Magic since 2013 and playing EDH or Commander since 2016. And I started off with a precon. I got the Atraxa Breed Lethality Proliferate precon, and I played with a group of pretty experienced people that removed Atraxa as soon as she'd hit the board for the first 2 years of my playing Magic with them. So I kind of was, I like to say, forged by fire and learning about the importance of protection, recursion. So I kind of leaned into a really heavy graveyard play style of being able to build up my graveyard as a additional part of my hand. I kind of follow in the same, like I like mid-range decks where I am playing a lot of low CMC cards on curve to get to a point where I'm creating Rube Goldberg machines of value and put myself in a position to try to claim a victory out of nowhere. I also really like combat decks. I think there's nothing more fun to me than just smashing somebody for commander damage. So I'm a big Voltron guy. I have a lot of different Voltron decks to kind of, Voltron's hard to win in commander. I'd like to prove otherwise. So mid-range, but also heavy combat.
I like this like dichotomy between the two of you where it's like Cody ran into a stacks deck and he vowed to never return to Magic again. You ran into kind of a stacks situation where they were blowing you up, and instead you fully embraced the dark side and you were like, I will smite them down and become stronger.
I like to think that it made me a better player. So those guys, if they're listening to this, I do really appreciate how many times they whooped my butt, even how much I probably complained during the
It's one of those like, I really appreciate you as my mentor. I know we're not on speaking terms anymore since you destroyed my commander, and please stay out of my life.
They're all blocked. They're all blocked on all social media
definitely.
platforms. Yeah.
You killed my commander 3 times in one game, it's over. We're done.
Yeah. We're delete my number.
Done professionally.
I guess I'll round out the end of this. So for me, I got into Magic 2019. I got invited over to some friend's house, and then for about 2-3 years, I didn't really play as much, with that big thing that happened in 2020 that kind of put everyone's social life on a little bit of hiatus. So I started at, I guess it would have been, Commander 2019, like the first real decks they started putting out as a consistent product. And then I kind of re-entered around Strixhaven time and didn't get into building until maybe the last 2 years or so. So primarily I've been like a precon player or lightly upgraded precon player. And then hasn't been until the last few years that I've sort of dabbled into the building process myself. I would like to say that mostly the decks I target are very interactive based decks. So one of the things I really like about Magic is when you play a lot of other card games, you tend to take your turn, pass to the next person, and then kind of sit there, let them do their thing, and then passes back to you. And you're almost playing more chess than you are like a fast-paced game. So I tend to lean more towards like instant speed interaction or things that force the table to make decisions like voting mechanics or prisoner's dilemmas type spells, things like that that are going to force people to constantly interact so that there's always like talking moments at the table. So I do tend to lean more into those, more into like the politic game of things of, hey, if you let me attack you, it'll get my trigger to do more damage to the third person, stuff like that. So I tend to play a little more like low mana curve, faster speed type stuff that usually cannot close out a game that great, but gets me almost to the finish line with a smile on my face.
As somebody who's played against you, Cory, many times, I do have to say there have been several decks that are really fun, but then and you look at the deck list and you're like, wow, how can you afford to have 22 pieces of targeted removal in this thing?
Because I need it, Cole. So that being said, let's kick off our first deck archetype that we think every brewer should try their hand at least once, and that's going to be card types matter. So this is kind of a broad umbrella, but to set the tone of what we're looking at, these are going to be the decks that focus in on specific types of cards, whether that is Enchantress type decks that really care about the quantity of enchantments you play, Artifact Matters, Affinity type decks that will deal with the speed of getting out other artifacts, or the more artifacts you have on the board, they pump your creatures. And also kind of extending into like Landfall and Spellslinger as an extension of that, where you're going to worry about obviously the amount of lands that are in the battlefield or the amount of spells, instants, and sorceries you're casting. And I do think there is a distinction here between this and a couple other types that we'll look at here in a second. And that when I was putting this list together, I kind of hit this in Voltron. And I think there's a similarity where in Voltron, you kind of go, oh, I've got a lot of artifacts out there because I'm putting equipment on things. There's a difference, I think, between a Voltron deck and like, let's say an Equipment Matters deck, where I would say the Equipment Matters decks or Auras Matter deck kind of falls into this typing because you're not necessarily powering up one creature, but you might be spreading those across the board.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between like artifact synergy, which cares about maybe you're tapping artifacts every turn and getting value off of that, versus the artifact equipment in Voltron that have their own benefits. And you can often find benefits of artifact synergy that you put, but it's not necessarily an artifact deck. If it's focused on building up one big creature, it often dips its finger into a couple different pies. Maybe you have a couple auras in there, and that's okay too.
Let's let Cody, why don't you kick this off? What do you think? I mean, why do you think someone should really look into building this kind of deck? If you're a new builder, what's something you could learn from kind of going, I want to build an Enchantress deck or a Landfall deck?
Yeah, so for me, my first precon was Landfall. It was the Obun Naya Landfall deck where you got to make a giant land to a creature, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. I think these are important because they kind of highlight a certain deck path that you can go down that has a lot of different avenues. Like the Enchantress deck I'm going to talk about today is kind of a weird one, but there's so many different, like you said, you can go Enchantress where you focus on just pumping up one big creature, like an Earl, where you just want to put as many auras onto him as possible, swing face. But then there's also just value. There's Sithis, where you can slam down just random enchantments, draw cards, you're flying through your deck. And so by doing these different things, you kind of get to pick like, okay, well, like, what do I want to do in this path? And there's most likely a commander out there. I mean, for artifacts, you look at Urza. Urza is insanely strong, but it's also it provides you with mana.
Hey, it's not that strong. It's not a game changer anymore.
Not a game changer anymore.
Maybe don't look at Urza.
Maybe don't look at Urza. Remember that Atraxa story from earlier? The same thing's going to happen to Urza. But there's also other aspects of like artifacts you can look at. Like there's that Gruul one where you can use them to tap for mana and then exile cards off the top of your library. Really sick. I think that's a really cool idea for artifacts. So yeah, I think that's the kind of benefit of going down these different paths, is that you have such different avenues for these like kind of weird archetypes.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think, you're looking at like Enchantress, for example, when you're talking about Sithis, things like that. And there are a lot of things where you get different payoffs. Like the Sithis thing is gain a card, right? So you draw a card whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield. But
and
there
gain
are
a life.
other ones like Onyxia is a popular precon, came out a couple years ago, where you're converting enchantments into creatures. So it does
Yeah.
matter about enchantments, but like the payoff is completely different than Sithis. But a Sithis is a great card in an Onyxia deck, you know? So
Well,
you
and
can
something about like Sithis is that now every card slot is competing with, well, does this draw me a card and gain me a life? So like, am I going to find space for a non-enchantment creature when
Mhm.
an enchantment creature that does the same thing is also going to draw me a card and gain me a life? So you kind of then are now funneling your you get advantage through like almost like a typal deck where you're focused on all goblins. It's like, well, now if I'm not playing a goblin, I'm basically wasting a slot. I'd rather have that apply to my whole game plan.
Yeah, and I think the only one that you could maybe make an argument otherwise, like as far as that enchantress or artifact type, where you go, well, if it's not 99 artifacts, then I'm wasting my time. Short of lands and stuff, would have to be like Spellslinger or possibly Landfall, because you can make the argument and go, okay, yeah, I want 40 land, but I need a payoff for them. I can't make 99 land in a creature.
Ashling players will tell you otherwise.
Or what's the when Cole first started trying to get his wife into Magic, we were at a command fest and he asked somebody like, "Hey, well, what do you think about these precons on the shelf behind you?" And the guy goes, "Let me tell you, you want Azusa Lost But Seeking and like 97 lands and then 2 spells that, her little feminine brain will be able to wrap her head around." And you're like,
That sounds fun.
"Yeah,
Yeah.
so thrilling." But even those, like, you can say on landfall deck that, yes, you're going to run a higher quantity of lands, and you're going to run things that let you play lands out of the graveyard, and you're going to run things that let you maybe bounce them back to your hand to replay them again, stuff like that. But the payoffs are going to be wildly different too, because you could go anywhere from like an Omnath that says, hey, when it enters the battlefield, there's Omnaths that make elementals, there's Omnaths that let you just bank mana. There's little things like Lotus Cobra that just gives you 1 extra mana. There's different payoffs, but I do think these are the kind of decks that really help you synergize a complete deck list, because they're not as obvious as maybe some other payoffs. You go, okay, I want to play as many lands as possible, but circling back to like your Enchantress argument, Cody, there's so many different payoffs there that you can find one that's your flavor and you just go, okay, I want to pack as many enchantments in here that I want to make sure like my draw is covered, my removal's covered, my ramp is covered, but let me flavor them through enchantments. Like, let me get a aura that lets me attach it to a land for extra mana, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you find creative ways to get to where you want to go. But the payoffs are a little wider, I think, than looking at like a traditional typal deck.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like you kind of get the incentive to be like, well, instead of putting Jenner's Gift, I can put an enchantment that like, Imprison in the Moon or something like that. Where it's like, okay, I'm gonna get a benefit for casting this because it's an enchantment. It's gonna trigger the Enchantress cards in the deck, which is Enchantress where it's the name from. I would say like the most difficult of all these is probably Spellslinger,
Oh, for
because
sure.
for a Spellslinger deck was not good. I was getting punched in the face constantly, and I was like, but I just want to cast my 20 mana fireball. Why am I getting hit so much, guys?
The
So that's
the problem with Spellslinger is like you can almost go like, okay, in artifacts, I want to find artifacts that can do certain things for me. There's just so many spells out there that you're like, do I want to cause damage? Well, let me grab these. And what, like my first Spellslinger deck was in Hello, the new Capenna like vampire that copies spells. And if you're a new player and you're looking at that thing, and now not only you slinging spells, but now you're copying them, so you got to understand how the stack works. And what if somebody tries to counterspell one of them, but then you've got the other one, but and then you're also sacking creatures to make the copies, so it becomes like this rules interaction web that if you're not like versed in, it's a slippery slope for sure.
yeah, that's definitely a nightmare for a new player.
Yeah. Hey,
Wait until you hear
Strixhaven?
about the deck I chose.
Yeah, well, okay, with that, let's look at some examples. So Cole, we're gonna let you kick this one off. You went Spellslinger? You think Spellslinger over artifacts and everything?
Well, we were talking about card type matters. I saw what you guys chose, so I wanted to pick something a little unique to that, and
You
I did go
metagame
with
this?
Spellslinger, which It gives you the access to instants and sorceries. I chose Gale Waterdeep Prodigy, which is a background commander with the background Scion of Halaster, which Gale allows you to, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery from your hand, you can cast a card of the other type. So if you cast an instant, it would be a sorcery from your graveyard. And then that spell would get exiled after it resolves. And with the Scion of Halaster background, each time you would draw, the first time you draw a card each turn, you instead look at the top 2 cards of your library and put one into your graveyard and one back on top of your library, then draw a card. So this is a deck that, you're getting to ignore timing restrictions. So maybe it is a little bit more complicated for a beginning player, but it kind of allows that like draw go play style of a spellslinger deck without as much commitment to, instant speed removal. Like if you now are able to fill your graveyard a little bit, get a, pretty big hand full of cards in that sense, if you have all this access to stuff in your graveyard, you can cast a little, like a cantrip, an instant speed cantrip, and use that to cast a sorcery on your opponent's turn. So it kind of foregoes one of the classic problems of like draw go, which is maybe I have no board presence and everybody's looking to deal combat damage. Well, they're going to attack me. Well, if I have a little bit of mana open, maybe I have, a Pongify, but then I also have something at sorcery speed that I'm going to get value out of my graveyard. And it is a little bit telegraphed because your opponents, unless you're playing on a spell table, should be able to see what is in your graveyard. The idea of this deck is you can discard big creatures and then at instant speed reanimate them out. And sorry, now I am going to block your commander with a cheeky Hull Breaker Horror or something to that extent. So you're not only going to be running instants and sorceries in this deck, unless you could go for a very combo centric play style. But obviously in our casual fun time commander games, probably lend more towards wheeling your hand into the grave, reanimating some big beaters, early before anybody can deal with it, and just generating tremendous value from.
Yeah, I also kind of like the fact that you're in a Tamir color pairing with this, so you've got Gale, which is mono blue, and then the Scion, which is black, and it kind of steers you away from that classic red blue everything's a Niv Mizzet spell casting cycle where you're going, I cast a spell, I draw a card, I ping you for 1 damage, and to draw another card and cast another cantrip, and because there's like so many of those that exist out there that are like cast a spell, draw a card, when I draw a card I ping you for 1, or I make like a 1/1 token or something like that they become like repetitive a lot of times on the board, that this being in a off color a little bit, like you still have access to great spells. Black has arguably one of my favorite set of spells. So it's just a fun color pairing.
And you do get a lot of the payoffs from like the blue side of the a pairing where you are generating tokens off of your spell casts, but with the advantage of that added graveyard synergy. I think it just kind of expands. Now you're not only can you cast your spells twice, or you kind of get a guaranteed flashback effect, you just get more value. Not to mention, instants are usually weaker than sorceries because of the timing restriction. But with Gale Waterdeep Prodigy, getting to skip that timing restriction makes all of your sorceries just that much stronger. An instant speed just devastates somebody if they're not expecting a.
Yeah, and I think getting that second cast too is very important, because when we're looking at kind of the types we've been talking about for a Card Types Matter deck, arguably Spellslinger is very susceptible of like running out of gas. Like if you don't have the right mana, or you go, hey, you cast that big Torment to Hellfire where you tapped all your mana to make it huge, and somehow they survive on the other end.
Counterspell.
Then you're fizzled. So the fact that you can, you get that double cast really helps. Because I would say this is probably the most susceptible to being like flash cannon-y as far as like the types. I would say like in our commander game, land is probably the safest. Then I would say enchantments, then artifacts, then spells, then creatures, obviously, as far as like what's the most removable, quote unquote.
Yeah, well, the instants and the sorcery, they remove themselves by resolving and then going straight to your graveyard. So.
All right, and then Cody, you went the Enchantress route, it looks like. So we've got Gilwain, Casting Director, which is a 1 green white for a human bard, 2/3. Gilwain, whenever Gilwain or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you choose one. You can create a royal role, a sorcerer role, or a monster role token and attach to that creature. So this one lets you make the little enchantment aura tokens.
Yeah, I love this one a lot. I think this one is unique among Enchantress decks because it lets you play a lot more creatures. And so if you're a newer player and you're wanting to dip your toes into Enchantress, I think this is a great way to do it because each of these roles entering will trigger an Enchantress effect where it's like when an enchantment enters, draw a card, or when an enchantment enters, put a +1/+1 counter on this.
Mm-hmm.
And so the rolls are actually really sweet because so the monster one gives +1/+1 and trample. The royal one gives +1/+1 and ward 1. And then the sorcerer goes +1/+1, and whenever this creature attacks, scry 1. So you kind of get your pick of okay, well, I have a big creature I'm going to put into play, like a Kogla. Let me give it trample. I'll give it the monster roll. Whereas when you play Gilwain, you probably want to keep him safe and on the board, so you give him the royal one where he has ward 1. And then whenever you need a little bit of card advantage, you can do the sorcerer one. But yeah, I like this one a lot just because it is so creature heavy. Like when I had this deck in paper, I was running, I think, almost 45 creatures because every creature is equal to an enchantment. And so I could trigger more of the Enchantress presence, or there was the main commander from where Gilwain was from made virtuous tokens, which would give +1/+1 for each enchantment on the field. So the more creatures or roles attached to them, you could just have huge creatures with these virtuous tokens out. So I love that for this. Actually, Spider-Man, we were talking a little bit about it early on, had that with great responsibility where it gets +2/+2 for each enchantment you own. Seeing that card made me go, all right, well, maybe I want to put Gilwain back together because if I have all these tokens out there, it's going to get huge. Something's going to get huge, and it'll be like a huge Spider-Man. So I was...
Yeah, and you're in green, which is famously, very difficult at cheating out big, beefy creatures from
so
nowhere.
famous. So famous.
Yeah, how would you possibly get a 7/7 out of your hand?
Yeah, crazy talk. You couldn't do it.
Actually, I can't remember who, but I do remember seeing this, and maybe it was Shuffle Up and Play or one of those videos at one point, and it went bananas.
Yeah, I think Rachel had this from Command Zone. I think she had it for a while. She played it on an episode, and so I remember seeing it there and being like, okay, I'm kind of sold on this. And some spicy tech is that the roll tokens are, in fact, tokens. So if you have Parallel Lives out, you make double. They go away.
Geez.
But
yeah,
you double trigger any Enchantress's presence effects, or you can draw 2 cards. Pretty sick.
Well, this is nice, like you said, that the Enchantresses are triggering themselves on entering. So if you play your Sithis, she's going to come in, enter the battlefield, then create the roll to attach to her, then give you the life and draw you the card. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, it kind of loops itself, kind of you can get a real nice engine going. Which is a nice thing for a new player to kind of learn these things.
Yeah, of course. Speaking of inspired by other creators, this is one that I believe you made a deck for, Cody, that I'm now going to steal your thunder, and I'm going to present my choice, which is Rinmaw Creaking Nest. So Rinmaw is 3 a black and a green for a legendary artifact creature scarecrow, 5/5. It comes with menace and reach, and when Rinmaw enters and whenever you play a card with 2 or more creature types, each player creates a tapped 2/2 black bird creature token with flying. The tokens are goated for the rest of the game. So this one here, you can actually play it a couple different ways. You could go Enchantress if you wanted to. I would tend to recommend building as an artifact deck. One, because you can load it with a ton of cool scarecrows. There are also a ton of cheap artifact creatures you can put in here that basically cover anything you could think of. So if you want ramp, there's things like Burnished Heart that come out, this artifact creature that you can sack to go get 2 lands. And especially in today's day and age, there's artifact lands, there's enchantment lands, Urza Saga exists if you really want to drop some coin. But there's a ton of different ways you can get these 2 or more creature types out there, or 2 or more card types out there. There's even artifact enchantments and stuff like that. And then you're populating the board with all these 2/2s. The nice thing is they come in tapped. So the way this kind of plays out is you come out on your turn. You ideally have the ramp or the mana to get out, let's say 2 or 3 other artifacts on the turn you get Rinmaw out. Give everybody 3 birds. Pass your turn. Player 2 then untaps. They're goated with their 3 birds. They have to swing at somebody other than yourself. The other players don't have those birds available to block because they came in tapped. So they swing their birds, hit player 3 tapping their birds in the process, then player 3 untaps, does the same thing, swings, taps their birds in the process. So nobody ends up having really any blockers unless they happen to have flyers already. And it just kind of lets you ramp the game out of control from there. The reason why I think this is a solid deck for artifacts in particular is there's a lot of combos that you can enact for very cheap on a budget, that if you're a newer player, there's things like Scrap Trawler and stuff like that
Sure.
basically say when it dies, you go fish another artifact out of the graveyard and put it to your hand or put it on the battlefield. So you create these loops with, you get 2 or 3 of them. You go, okay, I'm going to sack this creature to, let's say, an Ashnod's Altar for 2 mana. Well, then it goes to the graveyard. Then you pull out the next one, put it to your hand, play it for the 2 mana you just created, and create this endless loop until you eventually want to stop. And you can flood the board with as many of these birds as you want. And then just kind of play the political game of sitting back and watching your foes smack each other in the face.
It's some guaranteed bloodshed. And like you said, nobody plays with flyers. You're pretty much always going to just increase the damage. Yeah.
Which is crazy when you think about it, because like in every single game of Commander I've ever played, flyers matter.
Oh,
but there's nobody that has a ton of flyers on the board.
Yeah, unless you're playing against a Dragon or Angel deck, yeah, it's like, we're not doing anything with these flying, are we, Renwall is, so I wrote an article for manapool.com when they got shown off, and I was like, this is such a cool commander. I've since played against it quite a few times, and it's very messed up. It gets out of control very quickly. Because you just start making birds like crazy, and then you slam down a coat of arms, and it's like, oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, you make birds like crazy. There's also a ton of cheap artifact creatures. So I put this deck together on Moxfield. I'm trying to get it together on paper. But if you go back to like the Warhammer stuff, there's a ton of Necron synergy pieces that are all black artifact creatures that work really well in the deck. There's a lot of artifact creatures that came out recently with Edge of Eternities that are like 1/2 mana for a 1/1 death touch artifact creature. There's different things like that.
And what about artifact lands?
There are free artifact lands. There's even an enchantment land that came out with Dustmore last year. I think it's like Valgavoth's Lair, I believe it is. So there's plenty of options you can throw in there and just kind of have fun with it and let it go. So moving on, the next one we wanted to talk about, if creature types or card types matter, right? We all agree that card types matter and should be a solid deck point. But what if one single creature mattered and could make or break your game? We're going to be talking about Voltron next. So this is the concept of taking one individual creature, suiting them up a la Voltron style, whether that is with enchantments, artifacts, equipment, a mix of both in some cases, and just molly-whopping the board. So I know we all talked about our love for combat. So Voltron, I think everybody at this table has at one point Voltron decked, turned sideways, and looked at the sheer terror on someone's face as you just smashed them and trampled through for some unseen amount of damage.
Feels good. Feels a little too good sometimes.
Feels great.
It's worth stating that, usually you want it to be your commander, because your commander can kill somebody with only 21 damage, but you could build a Voltron deck that revolves around, buffing up a non-commander creature as well.
Do you want to know the craziest Voltron I've ever seen successfully?
Steal somebody else's commander and then kill them with it.
No. So, someone Darksteel mutationed a commander in a game I was playing, turned him into the 1/1 indestructible bug, and then that person took that bug and proceeded to Voltron the bug up and won.
You gotta respect
Which
that.
has got to be the most, like you respect it as a spectator. If you're in the game, though, it's got to be the most frustrating thing. Like, I removed your commander. What? Why? So, I guess let's talk about this. So, Voltron, obviously, the pros is you can point at one amazing creature and let it go ham. Cons are the susceptibility of if you lose that one amazing creature, you're hurting pretty bad.
There's also kind of like a social contract thing that comes up sometimes, where if you have the option to take somebody out of the game and you do, and then maybe somebody else dismantles your Voltron system, and now, I'm not going to be able to, one-shot Cory and Cody. So sorry, you're out of the game on turn 5. or how do you decide who to take out? And usually it's like, who do you think is going to be most likely to be able to stop you? Prioritize killing them first, but it does lead to some occasional feels bad moments.
So would you, I mean, by that standard, I hadn't considered it like that, but would you consider Voltron to be very similar, I guess, to like Infect? Because the classic Infect problem is you race out there, you get someone to 10 poison counters, you take them out, and then the other 2 people turn on you before you have a chance to take out another person. So do you think Voltron kind of falls in the same trappings?
You become a pretty big target because you're very clearly on the table trying to, hurt everybody or hurt one person. And hey, we're friends. I'll save you for last. That only gets you so far. Whereas everyone else can kind of hide behind.
So I only have 7 cards in my hand and nothing on the board. Please don't hurt me.
So it's a little more in your face about what it's doing. And I think it comes with its strengths and its weaknesses because of that. You can be a little bit political and, saying, hey, I'll stop that guy if you don't hinder me. But also you have to know how usually your Voltron deck requires a certain level of like protection, because otherwise there's a million different points in this chain that can break and just screw your whole system up. So if you're doing like a artifact equipment Voltron deck, you're a little bit more safe to your buffs leaving the field. But if you're playing an aura Voltron deck, as soon as your commander dies, all your auras are going to the graveyard. And then also power, if you're doing your commander, because with 21 commander damage, you kill anybody, you usually want your commander to have like a pretty high power or something that is, say it has 7 power. Well, I only have to hit Cory 3 times before, he's dead, versus something that's 5 power where now I have to hit him 5+ times if he's not, not buffed. But usually your deck has tools to minimize that number of attacks.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I've got one deck that's, I wouldn't necessarily say it's Voltron, but it's Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, where you kind of want to power him up with as many equipment or aura, because then he'll make tokens. And he'll make like these 3/1 elemental tokens. And initially I built the deck that had like a mix. So it had some aura, some equipment. And it felt bad anytime he would get blown up and you would lose all the auras without a way really to get them back, especially in mono red. So I shifted hard into the equipment side. And now it feels bad when I get blown up 5 times and he costs 10 mana to bring out and I can't do anything all game.
I would say in regards to your Valduk deck, that is crazy, because that deck costs maybe $11 if you got the whole thing foiled out, and it wallops, it destroys. You blink and you're at 1 HP.
Yeah. It's not that powerful. Let's downplay it so that I'm safe at the next commander night.
Yeah.
So we do have a couple decks here. Cody, I'm gonna let you lead this one off, because listen, mine made sense to me. Cole's makes sense to me. And then we've got Shram, Senior Artificer, who I usually see as like a support piece in a lot of these decks. But Shram is 1 and a white. You get a 2/2 Dwarf Advisor that's whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, you draw a card. Is this the Sithis of Voltron?
Yes. I think this goes in like any Voltron deck that has white in it, just so you can draw cards. And I'm here to say that SRAM deserves your respect, because
Okay.
you play your aura and equipment onto him, and he just draws you a card. He replaces the card you just played. So I had a SRAM deck for a very long time. Similar to Cole, the way I phrase it is, I don't like putting people in the cuck chair for command night, because when you kill someone on turn 5 with your 21/21 Voltron commander, and then someone kills your commander, and the other 2 are just like, well, it's like, okay, well, I just feel bad that I push you over there. Like you're just out of this game for the next 40 minutes while I try to kill people again. So I had SRAM for a very long time. I ended up taking him apart just because Voltron is like one of the ways I don't enjoy playing too much. I like getting creatures big, but like getting one creature big just to kill somebody early and then kind of struggle to get there in the end is not what I've enjoyed. But SRAM was really good because, like I said, he's card draw. He gets you the card back you just played. I ran him kind of at first as an aura commander, and then I eventually swapped over to equipment because, like you said, in white it's a little easier to get all those auras back. There's many ways to do it, but I just felt equipment felt better because there is that whole the equip cost of it. So you weren't constantly suiting up every turn. Like it was kind of a slow build, and that did help a little bit with the whole like killing someone on turn 5, because usually it was like turn 6 or 7 before he really got to one-shot territory. But the card draw is just so huge on him. And I think that's why he's always in the 99. And I was like, well, why not just make him the head? He's 2 mana. He comes down super early. He curves really well because you play him and then you play like your Sword of X and Y. So like it made sense to me. I liked him a lot. I had him like really blinged out, and it was really hard to take him apart whenever I was kind of like, I'm not a Voltron player. Can't do it anymore.
So when he first started, he was a aura commander. Now he's equipment. So is this projecting that in like 2-3 years he's going to be your mono white vehicle commander?
I have been looking for a vehicle commander. So I mean, this may
Now's
be
your chance.
This is much. Hey, SRAM's coming back. He's gonna be my vehicle commander.
I already found my vehicle commander, which is they just revealed today as we're recording it. So we're recording this on the official start of Avatar: The Last Airbender previews, and I say that in air quotes because I think they already revealed like 50 cards before the official start, but they made the big drill that tries to get into bossing Say into a legendary vehicle, which means I can now pilot Big Drill as my commander.
I mean, hey, you could do that.
Yeah. You know what? I think the one thing, and we didn't really talk about this yet on the Voltron bit, but what it also teaches people. So it does teach you, like, yes, the value of commander damage and getting through and kind of like timing and picking your opponents. But I do think the other thing that building a deck like this really teaches you is the value of protection spells.
Yeah.
So a lot of time when you're building decks, you're always thinking about things on the offensive, right? Like, how can I get through damage? How can I disrupt other people's stuff? But in a Voltron deck, you also have to balance it. So if you look at a lot of those lists and the artifacts or like the equipment lists, you see a lot of like Whisper Silk Cloak, Swiftfoot Boots, Lightning Greaves, things that are like, yeah, they come with haste and different things like that, but really also come with protection of some kind. So the one that I picked is one I actually did build as a budget gift swap for somebody 2 years ago, and that is Thrun, Breaker of Silence. So he's 3 green for a 5/5 troll shaman, which if you look at the art, I'm pretty sure he's a Ninja Turtle. So I don't know where this troll thing comes from. But Thrun comes with the perfect first line of this spell can't be countered, so you're going to get him out for free. Then he also has Trample, and Thrun, Breaker of Silence can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control. And then, if he already wasn't a pain to remove, as long as it's your turn, Thrun has Indestructible. So not only is he uncounterable, he's basically has hexproof from anything that's not green, and he's indestructible on your turn. So he is a monster to try and remove. So I ended up building this deck, and I chalked it full of other auras and things like that prevented removal, like Bear Umbra, things of that nature. So not only did he have Trample, but then he had 3-4 layers of protection on him. And I was told immediately after our like deck swap that I was a mean person for building a mean person deck, because if I remember, and I wasn't in the game, but I was told that it just went on Rampage and was impossible to remove.
Sounds like it. I mean, I brewed around this commander when it first got shown, and I was like, this seems like it's going to be really strong.
Yeah, and you know what the crazy thing is, and you'll see this when we go through the commanders that we're discussing today. So every single one except for 2 commanders are under $1. And in reality, most of them are under like 50 cents. So Thrun is like a 30-cent commander for something that is just nasty. And it's in mono green, so that 5 mana thing is not really 5 mana. It's like turn 3, you have Thrun out, and then he's just being obnoxious.
The beauty of green.
So it's just, what's that?
The beauty of green to get out your 5 mana commander on turn 3 with all these mana dorks.
Yeah, mana dorks and cultivates and, 3 visits and all that kind of disgusting stuff out here. So that's what I got. Now, Cole, speaking of big nasty...
Well, and cost reduced creatures. This is a 2 mana Voltron commander that I have that I love. It's Gulta Primal Hunger, which costs 12, but is a 12/12 trampler that's cost is reduced by the total power of creatures you control. So 99% of the time you're casting this, it costs 2 green. It fights through commander attacks like nobody's business, because as long as you have a board in mono green, it very rarely costs more than 2 green mana. You can get her out super quickly. And I play this Voltron deck with no equipment. I mean, I might have an equipment in there for a little bit of protection, like obviously lightning greaves and that sort of thing. But I rely on the natural 12/12 power, where you can kill someone by striking them twice, or by the host of cards in green that will double a creature's power, often at instant speed. So somebody might, well, I can survive the first hit from Galta. Psych, Boon of Boseiju, instant speed, 2 mana, and now it gets plus XX, where X is the greatest mana cost amongst creatures you control. And you might have cast her for 2, but her CMC is 12, so she's becoming a 24/24 real quick. Cards like Ram Through and things that allow you to essentially not fling her because you're not sacrificing her. On top of cards that fling her and sacrifice her with like Greater Good that will, she's about to be removed. What if I at instant speed just sacrifice her and draw 12 cards and discard a few cards? So your hand is constantly full, and there is a constant threat. Like my deck is focused all around haste enablers. Usually the turn she comes down, she's swinging, and hopefully, Berserk, 1 green mana, and she dies at the end of the turn, but she's a 24/12 for that one moment, and it catches people off guard pretty quickly. So this deck doesn't rely on auras, equipments, or anything like that. It's just it relies on the strength of the creature and somewhat of a spellslinger build, but then also a host of support creatures that also do a similar effect, like Zopendrel, the Hunger Dominus, which doubles everything. So it's the queen of stompy decks, but it kills more often than not with commander damage. So I call it a Voltron deck because of that.
And this is like the other solution to the Voltron puzzle, right? So if we look at Shram that Cody brought in, you're getting that card draw to kind of constantly be able to re-equip or power up or get new tools for your commander. I'm looking at more of the removal piece. Yours is almost embracing the fact that it's going to be removed and knowing that Voltron's going to be a target, but Galta with its cost reduction ability means that like commander tax is not a thing in this deck.
Yeah, and especially even if you're not able to buff it, if you get get a hit on each person or a hit on one person, well, you're unless they have a good deal of blockers, you're pretty much guaranteed to smack them down on the next turn. And you're in green, which has a ton of really nice instant speed protection spells that provide hexproof and indestructible. They get just a ton of outs, so you're never too afraid with Galta that like it's I'm never going to be able to recast her. Even if I have times that it almost works more like a combo deck because it sacrifices her and casts her again for value so many times. But we were talking about taking somebody out of the game or the cuck chair, so to speak. I don't know, something satisfying about sending somebody to the cuck chair with a 2 mana dinosaur.
It comes back time and time again, no matter how many times I destroy it.
Bring them to extinction,
Right, so we've got two decks down, or 2 deck types down, 4 more to go. So the next one we want to talk about today is going to be Kindred. So this will be your Kindred type decks. So the way I kind of broke these in to the umbrella is that they're a little separate from your card type matters. So these will be your things like Oops All Dragons, or it matters if they're all a certain creature type.
No spoilers, bro.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoops. But, let's say I want to build a deck that's all demons, or they're very thematic with their creature type. But also included in this umbrella are going to be things that have kindred, let's say, characteristics. So we've seen in recent years that for Boros, that there is like this 2 power or less kind of theme amongst effects. So if you build that deck that's all 2 power or less, or it's keyword synergies, like everything that has haste gets this, that we've seen with like the Sonic secret layers. So all these kind of fall under that kindred deck archetype. And I think this is kind of a natural flow from the card type matters and the kind of the Voltron aspect, because all those do tie into card types, and this kind of is an extension of that, but maybe a little more focused on creatures. You could make an argument that there's certain like subtypes, like shrine decks or something for enchantments, but really this is a creature focus somewhat of a build. I think the advantages here, and then I'll kind of pass it over to you guys, see what you think. I think the advantages to building a deck like this is, one, you do have built-in synergies, because if you pick a creature type that has more than 20 creatures or, within their subtype, you're going to find stuff that say like, all humans get trample, or all, dragons get fire breathing, or whatever kind of case is, or whenever a dragon enters, draw a card, stuff like that. I think the obvious downsides are each creature type also has its strength and weaknesses. So when we look at something like a dragon deck, for example, you're going to come with that high power, but you're also going to come with a high mana. So there might be more limited options in terms of like mana dorks and things like that. There are some, but they're a little more restrictive than say elves. Whereas elves, you're going to put a ton of them out on the board, but maybe they're a little frailer and more susceptible to like board wipes, stuff like that.
Yeah, with elves particularly, a lot of them are mana dorks. So you find the term elf ball because you play one, it allows you to play more, then suddenly you have a swarm of elves. And I think you made a really good point about if your type or your kindred has a large amount of creatures, it's going to be tremendously better because you have so many more options versus something like camels where you maybe have 3 to 5 creatures.
Whoa.
You can build a deck
Camel-
around, but
Camels have
bracket 1 for sure. My hump themed deck. Now
The hump
that.
is my mana curve, Cole. You get to like the 3 or 4, you see it scale up, and then it comes
Scale
right back down.
Yeah, I think the benefit also here is that Wizards of the Coast like specifically builds for certain types, like Dragons of Tarkir, and like so dragons are just always there. We're going back to Lorwyn soon, and so like elementals, giants, elves, like there's constantly getting support, and so it's also just nice for when you're kind of newer to building these because you're always going to get fresh toys to play with. There's always going to be a new elf. There's always going to be a new dragon every set. It kind of feels like, even in like Edge of Eternities, there were space dragons, and it was like, oh, cool, I get a new dragon for my dragon deck. Hell yeah! So yeah, I think it's just nice to have these kind of newer toys because Wizards of the Coast is like trying to hit, like they're throwing stuff at a board and like they're gonna hit dragon eventually.
It's what sells the cards often.
Yeah. I do think, if you are going for the Kavu or the camel or those kind of things, yeah, you're probably going to have a bit harder of a wait or longer of a wait. But yeah, if you're going for a major creature type like elf, goblin, dragon, even I would say giant, like you mentioned, if you do something that's, let's say, within the top 20, 25 creature types, these are something that is going to get better over time because they're not going to just all of a sudden stop making dwarves. Like, you might have to wait a few sets before you see another dwarf, but they're going to be out there on the future. They're not all of a sudden just going to go, you know what, I've got the Hobbit coming out next year. No dwarves this set.
Yeah. I think another thing is...
think there's... No, by all means, Cody.
I think another thing is WotC is designing for Commander in some aspects. And, there are people who are like, oh, I want a mirror Commander. And so they, in that Phyrexia All We One set, they made like the ultimate mirror Commander where it's all 5 colors and you can put all your mirrors in there and you're happy. And I know some people don't like that, but, when you can kind of get these catch-all, like we all know, the Ur Dragon is the most popular commander right now because you can play all your dragons in it. So WotC's done a really good job. They've done a good job about kind of getting all the colors together to kind of help you build a deck if that's what you really want.
I think it's also it's a fun kind of deck to build because it's so flavorful. If you say you really like the aesthetic of goblins, you could build a deck that every card has a goblin in the art because there's so many of them. You can make your lands, themed around where goblins hide in the mountain holes and all these things. So, and then you can also, if you feel really passionate about otters with all like the Bloomburrow stuff, there's an animal for everyone, or like everybody likes something or finds something interesting and cool, like vampires. I loved Twilight, so I want to build that's going to get me into Magic because I want to build a vampire deck or something to that extent.
Yeah. So with that being said, let's look at some decks here. Now, as the host of a dragon titled podcast, I am the only person that didn't pick a dragon themed deck, and weirdly enough, I don't have an dragon deck either. I only have one dragon deck, and it is, I shame to say it, Miram the Sentinel Worm.
Boo this man.
Yeah. The most popular and fair, very tasteful deck. But what I decided to go for is Kyler Sigardian Emissary. So this is a backup commander from when we did Midnight Hunt. So 3 green-white for a 2/2 human cleric. Whenever another human enters the battlefield from under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Kyler. Other humans you control get +1/+1 for each counter on Kyler. So this kind of scratches the Selesnya itch of both counters and making a wide board state, because you're benefited for playing things like Call the Copper Coat, stuff like that, that's going to put out multiple humans for you in one turn. So if you can sit there and drop 3-4 humans in one turn, suddenly Kyler gets 4 counters, and all those 1/1 humans are now 5/5 humans. So this is a deck that scales up very easily. These are probably the 2 most prominent colors to see humans in, other than possibly red. But this is just it's a easy deck. It's one I actually built for my wife, kind of upgrading a precon she got. And if you can put a bunch of counters on Kyler, and then incidentally you can put counters on other things. There are a lot of humans that say when a human enters the battlefield, put a counter on another human, or put a counter on each other human you control. And then you can couple it with things that have Outlast effects. So the Outlast cards are predominantly humans, and they'll say things like anything that has a counter on it gains trample, or gains flying, gains first strike, things like that. So there's ways to manipulate those creatures where all of a sudden these little 1/1 dorky humans are now 10/10s with trample and flying. And it kind of hits you out of nowhere with a very wide board state that also gets very tall very fast.
It slaps. It's a dangerous deck to sitting down against Sharon with Kyler. I always groan internally and then externally because it just is crazy.
Well, and the nice thing about humans too, in particular, is they have such a low mana curve. They're second maybe only to elves as far as like super tiny mana curve, because I think on this particular deck, Kyler being the 5-drop is actually the top end of the deck. Almost everything else is 1, 2, 3 mana, and then like your 5-cost mana are like Riders of Gavany and stuff like that give all your creatures like massive boosts. So very, very easy deck to put together. You're in white and green, so protection for Kyler and removal spells and stuff like that are very readily at your fingertips. That's what I got, and now I guess I'm going to turn it over to the real dragons who are trying to usurp me and my lowly humans. Cole, you have a dragon commander who is not in fact a dragon, I believe.
Yeah, he's a Viashino warlock. He's Rivaz of the Claw. This is Rakdos dragons. I didn't realize, Cody, you were also doing a dragon deck. So I think there's enough.
They're just so cool.
Design space here that they're different.
Yeah.
But dragons is such a satisfying like type that, like you said, they're constantly being printed. They are themselves inherently strong. They don't rely on having a large weave of multiple dragons together. You can usually deal a lot of damage with just a few. I play a mono red dragon deck and I love it because of that restriction of just being in mono red. But with Rivaz, he's Rakdos. He has Menace. You can tap him and add 2 mana of any combination of colors. You can only use it to cast dragon spells. And once during each of your turn, you can cast a dragon spell from your graveyard, and then it gains when this creature dies, exile. So, like you said, Cory, dragons cost a lot of mana usually. They draw a lot of threat. They deal a lot of damage. People like to remove them. A Rivaz of the Claw kind of mitigates that by not only, you play him on turn 3, he's a 3-cost commander, you're able to play a 6 CMC dragon on turn 4 and kind of start the train. Also having access to black, if your creatures get removed, well, you just cast them back from the graveyard, or you cheat them out with a reanimate spell, or, it also lets you benefit from the red card draw archetype of looting, where you draw cards and discard. Well, this, you maybe just discard your dragons and you're able to cast them, so you're really not getting any sort of disadvantage from discarding. In fact, you're getting buffs from it. I think dragons also benefit from their kind of being mechanically unique compared to other types, that they have flying. You could almost play a deck that doesn't care about the fact that they're dragons, but the fact that they're flying means that they're usually going to be able to connect. Rarely do you have somebody who's, unless they're playing a dragon or an angel deck, like they're not going to have a consistent amount of flyers to block you. So I think you just always get to do something with a deck like this. And with Rivaz, being 3 mana, you're able to cast it early and start your game plan early where other dragon decks might fail. And I never get to cast my cool boss monster dragons. So
Yeah, and you know what's funny is a lot of times when you have a commander like this that's also the mana dork, people are very like reluctant to remove it because it's almost like they look at it and they go, I mean, I don't want to blow up his like talisman or his arcane signet. Like it just feels different, even though arguably that's what's like propelling your deck forward.
yeah, not me. I'm destroying everybody's arcane signet. I am blowing up a soul ring. I am spell snaring. I'm doing anything I can. Mana tithe.
Force of willing your turn 1 soul ring.
Pact of negation, soul ring, concede.
I think one of the craziest stories I have is that I watched someone get their turn 1 soul ring counterspelled, and I was like, for them, I felt angry. I was like, are we doing that here, guys? What's going on?
You were reassessing
My
the
hand
whole
only
table.
works with a soul ring in it. I was going to cast Cultivate.
Well, then that's a bad hand.
What are you talking about, Cole? Turn 2 cultivate is into a turn 3 second land drop.
Turn 3 Sky Shout Claim. That's the play.
Ooh, that's the move. I'm ramping, boys. We're popping off.
I would echo everything Cole said. I picked Ganax, Astral Hunter, and Acolyte of Bahamut. Ganax says whenever Ganax enters or another dragon enters, you create a treasure token and you can choose a background. So the background being Acolyte of Bahamut. Acolyte of Bahamut says commander creatures you own have the first dragon spell you cast each turn, cost 2 less to cast. Dragons are just cool. They're just like it's the number one fantasy creature when you think of it. Like you think of fantasy, you think of dragons. And so, yeah.
I think of gelatinous cubes, actually.
Oh, well, we should probably talk about your childhood because that's a little weird. So yeah, I went for a Gruul version because I felt like this is like a great like intro deck for someone who wants to build dragons because it is Gruul as in you get to ramp a lot. You get treasures from Ganax. Your first dragon you cast when he's out is 2 less, and then there's just mana dorks aplenty. So you get to play like Cory said, one of the downsides of dragons is that they cost a lot. This deck seeks to prevent that. You seek to ramp a ton and play those big beaters. So that's why I went for it. I don't currently have a dragon deck. I want to get one though because in Magic Con Atlanta we picked up those exclusive Dragon Shield sleeves that have like all the dragons on them, and I'm like, I gotta find something to put these in, you know. And Rivers of the Claw was always one I looked at. So hey, maybe I need to take a peek.
See, and I came within 2 seconds of turning this into a 3 dragon thing, and then I veered at the last second, and now I'm regretting it. I could have been part of the pack.
Well, dragons need food, and humans provide pretty good dragon fodder. So
Sustenance,
Sure,
yeah. And little known fact, humans don't fly typically.
Yeah.
Though neither does Rivaz of the Claw. So, you know. So, you see the flawless way that I just finessed both of you to laugh with me. That's because now we're going to talk about politics. Kind of hitting the halfway point here. So, politics is maybe a little bit of a more abstract topic at the commander table. You can obviously look at one of these first chunks of decks and go, oh, it's obviously an enchantress deck, or look, it's all dragons, stuff like that, and you get an instant feel for maybe where they're headed. Even if you don't know the exact deck list, you know, okay, if it's going to be dragons, I better brace for big BD flyers that are going to try and burn my face off. Politics is a little more subtle because you have to work around not only is what's on the card, but the social contract that's not on the card. So this is going to be a little bit of like, what can I team up with other players to do? You know, can I make deals where you don't attack me this turn so I can handle this threat over here? And the challenge with building a deck like this is you're working with words that aren't directly printed on cards. So you can find commanders that will kind of supplement or encourage your friends or foes to attack each other or cast a spell and we all draw cards or different things like that. This does take a little bit of legwork though, and the reason why I wanted to add this one to the list of deck types we should try, or you should try to build, is because ultimately we play a social game that you sit down with 3 of your friends or 3 of your arch enemies. I don't know. I don't know what kind of Friday night you like to spend. Maybe it's like 3 people I loathe and I gather them together so I could hit them with my Revez of the Claw deck that I've built just for this moment. But this gives you that opportunity to have like crosstalk and banter and stuff kind of as the game progresses.
Yeah, I think, that's the most fun part about a commander is the conversations, or like, how do we work together to disrupt Cory's game plan? Yeah, his Valduck is generating 47 tokens every turn.
Yeah, but
we
there are
need
only
to
3
stop
ones
him.
with trample and haste.
My favorite memory of like starting to play commander was somebody swung out at me and they were going to kill me, and then one of my buddies, Bob, cast Aether Spouts, and he said, "You're not out of this game yet." And then I felt indebted to him that, hey, at the very least, if I'm gonna go down, I'm taking down my boy Zach first. Politics, it draws a fine line between like politics and group hug. Of if it's helping everybody, it's not really political. You kind of want something that is choosy, or I'm not benefiting the guy who's popping off. I'm benefiting the underdog who needs just a little bit of extra card draw to maybe get their deck on wheels.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like this is kind of the differentiating point between politics and, let's say, a group hug deck like a Miss Bumbleflower that's very popular these days, where you go, okay, I'm casting and you draw a card, and the next turn you draw a card, and and you're kind of supporting the entire table until it's time to break away. Is this one here is maybe you're encouraging other people to take actions that they wouldn't necessarily take, or you go, hey, if you and I team up for this go around of the table because this third person their board state's gotten too big. So if you can attack and get them shields down, then I can deliver a knockout punch or something like that. That's kind of where the difference is on politics, is that you're setting, I would say, like an objective or an end goal or a enemy to try and like divide the table a little bit, but divide them in your favor. Whereas I think if you look at like a group hug deck, you're going, okay, I want to keep all the boats afloat until it's the last second, and then I want to sink the other 3 boats.
Yeah,
You also find group hug decks that don't really, they're like, hey, we're just helping everybody out, no concern for winning whatsoever, and that has its own stigma, I would say.
Yeah. So these are the kind of like decks you want to put in, like your Lorn of the Third Path kind of stuff, where it's going to enter, destroy a target artifact or enchantment, and then you can tap it so you and another player draw some cards. Stuff like that, where you're going, you and I are on the same page, and forget the other couple people. And then guess what? When you and I aren't in alignment anymore, now I'm the best friend with the person I screwed over last time, and you're on the odd person out.
Danger to that too, because if hey, you and I are on the same team, well then, all right, Cody, you and I, we clearly this is becoming two-headed giant.
Yeah, we have a
I mean,
saying in our pod where it's a secret alliance whenever someone like needs to team up with the other to help out, take out somebody. So that's our version of politics, is a secret alliance to help this guy get out of here a little quicker. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of those things because it's not like expressly written in the rules or the card does this, that you kind of live or die by your own sword. So you want to build the deck that helps support you or gives you the most opportunities to deal make. Like I run mana rocks in my Brina deck, for example, that like Victory Chimes is one that I can gift one person 1 colorless mana and it untaps each turn. So it's like each turn I have the opportunity to go, do you want 1 mana? Because if I can give you 1 mana, maybe I help finesse your curve this turn and helps you out, and then you don't target me with that removal spell.
All right, but I have seen this happen in a game where now every single turn has a 5 to 10 minute conversation. Well, how many of your firstborn children are you willing to promise me for 1 colorless mana?
You jest, Cole, but you also know that
It's not a joke. It's
I've
serious.
saved myself. That card has infinite value to me. So, Cole, we're gonna let you kick this one off. So you have gone the Orzhov route, which I think is weirdly traditional politic colors. It is the Senate, after all. We've got Shadrick Silverquill.
5 mana, he's 3, a white and a black, for a flying double strike Elder Dragon. At the beginning of your combat, you may choose 2. Each mode must target a different player. You either A target player creates a 2/1 white and black inkling creature token with flying. You can have a player draw a card and lose 1 life, or you can have a player put a 1/1 counter on each creature they control. So this is kind of a a more hands-free politics as far as like the commander goes, because you have so many options. You don't have to help anyone. You could choose one mode. You could choose no modes, and if you choose one, it can just be for yourself. It's pretty versatile because you can build it in so many different directions. But I've drafted one out on Moxfield that cares about creating a lot of tokens. And while I'm using Shadrix's abilities to help mitigate, my threat or make people a little happier. Oh, you need a card draw. Maybe you're looking for that land. I can help you out while I'm, buffing up my tokens with 1/1 counters and preparing for an alpha strike. You're in Orzhov, so you have a lot of interaction, targeted removal, board wipes, and protection spells for your own stuff. So this is politics as bare minimum. Hey, I can make you this 2/1 flying blocker, so I'm not going to attack you with my commander if you can block it, or I'm going to help out the guy who's mana screwed. He hasn't been able to draw enough cards. Just make a couple friends across the table by minimal card draw. It's nothing too swingy. It only happens once on combat, but it allows you to kind of focus on your own game plan while still influencing the rest of the board. And however deep you want to go with that is up to you.
Yeah, and this is also a fun one that I've seen people play where you can kind of make that deal like, hey, I know you've been struggling on getting your card draw up. If I swing this, I'll let you draw the card and I'm going to put the counters on my stuff. Or I've also seen the opposite where you kind of put someone at ease and go, hey, I'm going to swing this, but just so you know that, I'm not the threat to you. I'm going to give you the flyer. That way you've got a blocker for this later. So,
Right.
You feel a little protected. And in return, I'm going to do whatever, draw a card or put counters on things.
Rakdos charm, kill you with the inklings. Yeah, no, obviously it's Orzhov, so you can do that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and this thing having double strike too makes it like sneaky stronger than it is, because you look at 2/5 and go, oh, it's gonna take forever to take me out. If you go two go rounds here and put the counters on both times, well, 2 turns later, suddenly it's a 4/7 that's really 8 damage at double strike.
Yeah, you take somebody out with like three swings if you go with the counter mode. So kind of pretty versatile as far as a politics deck goes.
Yeah. All right. Now I have one very famous political commander that I probably am best known for, that I think you all know what I'm going to talk about, and it's not that deck. So we're going to be talking about Felgar of the First Brood. This came out in Final Fantasy. So that's 4 and a blue for a 5/5 Elder Dragon. See, I snuck a dragon deck in here. Flying Vigilance, Ward 2. And then when Frelgar enters...
You should have
so
picked one
bad.
that you could pronounce its
You're hurting
name.
me so bad.
Yeah.
As someone who played Final Fantasy 14, this is hurting.
Yeah. But when it enters and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, target creature gets +1/+0 till end of turn and can't be blocked this turn. So there's a couple routes you build this deck. You want to put as many like instant speed cantrip kind of things in the deck as possible. And then you also typically want to put in here things that say whenever this card or whenever a creature does combat damage, do blank. So whether that's like whenever it deals combat damage, draw a card, or it's even something as big as like an ancient silver dragon that says whenever you do combat damage, roll a d20, then draw that many cards. So the offensive stuff is pretty obvious. You want to go, all right, I'm going to swing out with this card. When it deals combat damage, I get to do some effect, and then I'm going to cast a cantrip real quick and make it unblockable. But the political aspect to this is that you're also able to sneak through other players' cards. So you can make deals and arrangements at the table and say, hey, Cole, if you want to swing out with your creature that gets some kind of attack trigger or combat damage trigger, I'm going to guarantee that it gets through. Now, that could be your commander to do lethal combat damage. That could be... there's a lot of 1/1s out there that say when this deals combat damage, you get some crazy effect, make a treasure token, different stuff like that is balanced by the fact that they're like 1/1s with no evasion. Well, I've got the evasion to help you get a little further on your board state, and in return, you'll leave me alone, or in return, we're cool, that kind of stuff.
Planeswalkers too, if I got a planeswalker, he's about to ult. Well, I can help with that. Make your guy unblockable and keep him below that threshold.
Yeah, I never considered the political aspect of this. When I'm looking at that commander, I'm going, "Oh, I'm gonna make it unblockable to hit you with a flying dragon." But that's a pretty nice way to do that with the politics. I like that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people saw the PlayStation drop recently, and they saw that Jin Sakai Ghost of Tsushima deck and kind of had this similar idea. Well, this is sort of like that, except you have the added advantage of making other people's stuff unblockable. So it gives you like kind of that deck, restricted in colors, but with more flexibility on what you can support the board for. And then Cody, I think you've gone classic, the quintessential classic political commander with the queen herself, Queen Marchesa. So we've got 1 in Mardu for a 3/3 human assassin. Death Touch Haste. When Queen Marchesa enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent is the monarch, you create a 1/1 black assassin creature token with Death Touch and Haste.
Yeah, so when I thought about politics, this was the first one that came to mind. It also just feels like the kind of sneaky way to play politics because, turns out Magic players like to draw cards. So if you introduce the monarch into a game, it's pretty quickly you're going to be losing it. But you can kind of politic it in a way where you're like, well, hey, I have creatures out, but I won't block you if you help me out a little bit. Let me get it back in another turn or two, things like that. Also, just the little 1/1 assassins, those add up really quickly with token doublers and things like that. The set can kind of go wide a little bit, which is not something you would think, but it can be a lot of fun. This is one I've actually been looking at potentially building recently, and the Monarch is it's such a fun mechanic for politics because it's going to cause people talking oh, hey, he has a Monarch, I should swing at him. People want that card draw, so they're going to blow up people's boards that normally they wouldn't care about, but they want to get that card draw. So it's a real fun thing.
Yeah, and I do like this. One, the Monarch is like a blast to play at. If there's any game that has the Monarch introduced, instantly becomes a better game to be in. I'm hard pressed, honestly, when I build decks, especially if they're monocolored or even in some of the 2-color decks. I'm super hard pressed not to put the court cycle in, court of whatever that would give you the Monarch, and they give you benefits if you are the Monarch at your upkeep. They're too fun. It's too stimulating at the table.
I would also say one of the most forgotten mechanics at the table. Oh, I was the monarch. Wasn't I supposed to draw a card? Oh, you attacked me, so you were supposed to. Oh, the initiative. Somebody's initiative. It is one of those things that unless you have a cute tracker for it, it sometimes does get forgotten.
I see so many tchotchkes get dropped on top of a deck. This coin will remind me that I was the monarch, or this bottle cap is the monarch crown.
Bust out the Burger King crown.
Yeah,
that's how you do it. It is funny the 1-to-1 groan when someone introduces the initiative because it's I gotta fucking keep track of that versus the monarch and people are like, let's go.
Yeah, even though the initiative is basically the monarch with walking through a dungeon.
Yeah,
monarch, but 1,000 times more complicated. It's that meme where the guy is doing the kickflip and then the other guy is kickflipping over a billion things but ends up crashing all the same.
I had this terrible concept one time that was, if there was a game where you had a 6-sided dice and your upkeep you could roll it, and it was going to be, you gain the initiative, you become the monarch, planeswalk, chaos ensues, and I forget what the other ones were.
It
and I was
becomes day or night or something.
Yeah. But I was
nightmare
this is
hellscape, Cory. What the hell?
Attractions, toss those in there.
Yeah. I think, you know what though, you bring up day and night. I think that's the worst thing to track. Monarchy is probably the most forgotten thing to track. Day and night cycle has got to be the most hated thing to track.
Yeah, it's. I was looking at it's Astral Archmage.
Vadric.
It's Vadric. I was looking at Vadric earlier today, and I was like, this would be kind of cool to build. And I thought about it wrong and hard, and I was like, no, it wouldn't, Cody. It would not be cool to build. It would suck.
But here's the crazy thing, right? Vadric, objectively, if you look at the day-night cycle, is a pretty easy trigger because you're almost guaranteed at least 1 or 2 flips, throughout the game. So it's like it's actually a pretty easy trigger. Like he would be powerful if it wasn't for how obnoxious and how much people would loathe you for introducing the mechanic.
Yeah.
I just turn the lights off in the room when it's night cycle, and then turn them back on when it's day. And then when it's
you get
night,
a-
everybody's got their flashlights out, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, let's transfer back to the." You know,
Just get a
it's
clapper
super easy
where
to
you're
remember.
like,
Yeah.
It
Just
is
the little
night.
remotes.
clap activated.
Yeah, I think that's just objectively obnoxious. But I do like in the Marchesa deck, the 1/1 assassins, because when I first started playing, I built like the very first deck I ever built was a 60 card like green black death touch deck. The whole concept was like, what if I could give something first strike and death touch? That sounds obnoxious. And it's got nothing but these like little 1/1 for 1 death touch spiders and stuff like that. And they do put in way more work than you'd think. Like people, they don't want to attack you. Everyone's afraid that you're going to block with one. And they've got to trade their big item with it. It's a lot of fun. All right. So we are 4 down, 2 more to go. We did kind of hint at this one when we talked not Voltron, we were talking politics. So this next one, we've kind of highlighted certain aspects of things you'd want to learn while building. So whether that's valuing protection, whether that's valuing table talk, stuff like this. This one we're going to be talking about is table parity. So this will be like your group hug and your group slug decks. So table parity in the sense that these are the decks where you want to kind of keep everyone at the same level, whether that's group slug where everyone's kind of dwindling life totals and then you break off at the last second, like we're all down to 5 life totals and I'm gonna clinch the win, or group hug where you keep everybody drawing cards and gaining life until you're ready again to break off and be the dominant force. These ones here, I think, kind of teach you a little bit about life. Life matters, that life is a resource, especially in the group slug aspect. I also think these are the kind of decks that teach you the value of resources and resource management, whether that's like card advantage, whether that's in the form of counters, whether that's in the form again of like life gain or trading resources. So you do run into a lot of things like, okay, I'm going to give you this card draw. In the case of, let's say, Miss Bumbleflower is like the one that I constantly go back to because one is super popular. It's a very powerful precon, but it goes whenever you cast a spell, you can put a 1/1 counter on her and then, or on any creature, and they gain flying, and you choose somebody other than yourself to draw a card. So you're making that trade off of like, my spell's getting through, I'm going to let you draw the card so you don't counter my spell. And then I'm getting the ability to have a flying buffed up creature for the turn. So you do also have that aspect of like resource kind of exchange.
And we all know how big Bumbleflower gets after a couple turns. Oh, yeah, I'll take the card. That sounds awesome. Love this guy. And then quickly the rabbit's out of the hat and it's out of hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my other busted semi-political commanders. Big Booty Judy over there.
I'm mainly just upset that Bumbleflower dethroned Quain for group hug because I love Quain. Quain's just a cool little card. Yeah, so it's funny because the only group hug deck we have in my meta is Feldergriff, where it's giving out little hippos, and then the Bumbleflower deck got like kind of shown off, and we were like, oh, this is what they want group hug to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of giving out cards and then having a giant flying rabbit hit you in the face. Cool. Good to know.
Yeah, so I've got like 2. So I've got the Miss Bumbleflower precon, which is out of the box. I'm not going to say it's the strongest precon you've ever seen, but it is up there. It's in the upper tiers of strong precons out of the box for sure, especially in the last couple years. And I have one that I've done on Moxfield that I've kind of played around with a little bit. That's Kami of the Crescent Moon, which is just on everyone's upkeep, they draw an additional card. And that one is also like sneakily oppressive in the Miss Bumbleflower way because you load it with like Howling Mind and stuff like that. So suddenly everybody's like, well, I drew 7 cards at my upkeep because you have all these different effects. And then secretly what you're doing is you're like milling them, but it's not as hated as mill because they're going, I see the cards. Like they're not just getting dumped in my graveyard. But really, you're kind of doing the same thing.
Some reverse psychology there. It's like, I'm not milling you. They're going to your hand. You're just discarding them.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I'm just going to put this Jin Gataxias out and make your hand size 0. Whoops.
one dangerous thing about group hug in that manner is that you are supplying your opponents with a ton of tools. For every one extra card that you draw, they're drawing 3. And so you are potentially giving them the tools to dismantle your game plan, but you're hoping that I'm the cute bunny, or I'm the commie with the cute butt on the cliff or whatever. Don't hurt me. So you do gotta kind of implement the small bean strategy.
Well, and that's why I think too, especially like group hug. Group hug goes so hand in hand with like control, and I don't mean like stacks kind of control, but even when it was Quain, there was that, like, they called it bunny cops, where it was like you're drawing a card, but I'm gonna carry so many counter spells, and I'm gonna have so many like arrests and stuff like that are just gonna go, okay, I'm gonna stop you real quick. You get a little bit out of control. So I think the group hug aspect, you do have like a little bit of a very light kind of control deck build to it as well. The group slug, I don't think you have to worry too much about that, because even though you're still focused on like table parity, usually group slug decks aren't providing card draw. You're looking more at like, hey, here's a Descent to Avernus. Like, that's probably the most resource is you're giving, where it's like, here's Descent to Avernus. We're all making treasure. Oh, by the way, we're all losing massive amounts of life while it happens.
I think group slug more so is like, I think of Nekusar as a very key like group slug one. It's given the card and pinging you while you go. But yeah, it definitely doesn't care too much about giving people things. It's mainly just more of like, I want to slowly drain the table and then eventually like do a very big drain that like wins me the game. So yeah, I think it doesn't have the same issue as group hug, or group hug like. And I think there's a very big difference in like Bumbleflower is giving a card, but then there's like the group hug decks that go like super hard into like, oh, I have the enchantment where you can play 2 lands a turn. Oh, I have the mana rock where like I'm giving you mana. Oh, I have the whatever Howling Mind lets you draw more cards. And it's like, okay, like you're giving all this stuff out, but like, how are you winning? And like they just don't have that game plan. So
yeah, and I think that's where the breakthrough on like Miss Bumbleflower was, because Miss Bumbleflower gave you an outlet to the kind of that deck. Like that deck, yeah, it's always existed, where there's that person that's like, we're all having a great time, aren't we, guys? Let's all draw cards and don't bother me. And I think that was kind of like the Quain drawback, because even Quain is like, you may draw a card. So you're not, you could sit there and go, my deck's getting a little low. I'm good, thanks. Whereas Bumbleflower's like, no, you are drawing a card, and also I'm making something big, and it's gonna be a flyer, so good luck blocking.
yeah.
The deck I was talking about with like the Kami of the Crescent Moon, yeah, it has a lot of those, like Howling Minds and stuff like that, and Font of Mythos and those kind of things. So you are drawing a bunch of cards, but it does have the outlets like Forced Fruition. Like, yeah, you're drawing all those cards, but as soon as you cast a spell, you're drawing another 7. So you're like dramatically whittling down your deck. So the win con there is kind of like a hand control type aspect. So it's like group hug esque, because you're able to draw the cards, but it's kind of preventing that. I think honestly, group slug is probably where a lot more like newer players would lean to, because they want to deal damage, and you see that a lot with like your Lord of Pain decks that have come out in the last year. Vial Smasher's always been an old school kind of thing, where I've always been a fan of Vial Smasher, in the sense that like, you cast a spell and then we're going to roll a dice and it's going to hit somebody in the face, and it's not going to be me.
Vial Smasher rules. I love that card so much.
So I know we talked about earlier that all of our deck options, except for 2, were going to be in the $1 range. So one of them was Renmaw, which was like $1.32. One of them is $12, Cody, and you have some explaining to do. Now I know why it's $12, because there's exactly one printing of it, and it is in the pre-con that came out last year. So yes, it's $12, or you could just go find the pre-con and realistically get it for 1/100th of whatever you spent on the pre-con, I guess. So you've got Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls. Specifically, this is the Rakdos one, not the 9 mana all black spend life to manipulate the graveyard. So this is 2 black-red for a Elder Demon 4/4. There's flying, ward, pay 2 life, and then whenever an opponent loses life for the first time During each of their turns, put a 1/1 counter on Valgavoth, Hero of Souls, and draw a card. So you get that card draw, you get the counter buff, like a Mrs. Bumbleflower, but evil.
Yeah. But a giant demon that wants to murder you. Yeah, so this was my first foray into Group Slug. So this was from the pre-con. It was the Face Commander. I think the price is because when Dustborn first came out, those pre-cons were like impossible to find. Like I remember like rolling in, we were in like on vacation in Colorado, and I rolled into a random game store and they had them, and I was like, I have to buy these before we go home. Like I have to like get these now because I knew getting back home I was not going to get them. But now they're like everywhere, so I don't know why it's so high. But yeah, I think this one kind of has a negative connotation to it because it's a pre-con commander. So many people are running it, similar to Miss Bumbleflower, where like it's like oh, baby's first group hug, baby's first group slug, and it puts in work. That +1/+1 counter and drawing a card is really easy to do. They give you all the tools in the deck to do that with like a Cataract Parasite, where like whenever a person draws a card, it's going to deal them a damage. Well, hey, guess what? Now I'm going to draw a card, and Valgavoth has a flyer who's going to get bigger. Oh, what's that? You want to target him? Well, guess what? You're paying 2 life. I'll draw a card and get bigger. So it's just like, dang. Like it's just, it kind of fuels itself in a way. I really enjoy this as like my first foray into Group Slug because it just kind of like, I think Group Slug is great for 2 things. It's great for that, hey, it's the last game of the night. Let's get going. Like play something quick or play something that's going to kill people quick. Let's get this done. Or it's just great for those people who like to pillow fort. Those lifelink decks, you know, my buddy Laz, who I do the podcast with, life gain is his favorite strategy. Well, hey man, I'm gonna burn you down. But like you're gonna gain that life, but I'm gonna keep burning you, and eventually I'm gonna find a way to make it so you can't gain life. That's always the fun one when you can find one of those. So that's where I think Group Slug like really shines. Is you know end of the night or when someone's pillow forting.
Yeah, I completely agree with that because my first foray into it was Karavik the Merciless, which was like Valgavoth before Valgavoth. So that one's a 7-mana commander, so it's a bit pricey to get out in Rakdos, but when it comes out, it's whenever an opponent casts a spell, you deal damage to any target equal to its mana value.
Yeah.
So you can throw that at like people's face, you can blow up their biggest creature, stuff like that. But the whole deck is filled with kind of the same stuff that's in the Valgavoth precon, so like your Cataract Parasite. It's got Zozu the Punisher that just says whenever a land enters the battlefield, its controller loses 2 life. And it's great for like the non-thinky deck. You know, when there's like Gruul players to go sideways and smash. No, Group Slug. You sit back and go, okay, I want a game that's going to last 30 minutes. And I'm going to win at 3 life, and everybody else is going to have 0. And that's, you know, I'm going to have it razor thin to the wire, and either I'm going to lose and the game will be over, or I'm going to win and the game will be over.
The one kind of, I think, disadvantage to playing a Group Slug type deck is everybody, if they're thinking that they can all kind of team up on you and say, hey,
Yeah.
Cody is burning all of us right now. What if we combined our forces and struck him where he stands and kind of got to evade that Group Slug? Because often a lot of Group Slug isn't full group. It's you guys. I don't get slugged. I don't participate in the slugging.
Well, but doesn't that like feed what he said? It's the last deck of the night. So you team up, you take me out. Okay, I'll start packing up and head home.
Yeah. It's also that kind of like villain status where you're like, oh, well, yeah, team up. I want you to try to kill me. Like, I'm going to kill you all if you don't. So, yeah. Like, I think of my buddy Alan's Nekusar deck. Like, it is very much like if we don't team up, he's going to get infect on that guy and wheel us, and we're all screwed. So yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, Cole also went, I guess, Group Slug is what I will classify this one as.
I'd like
This
to
is
say it's kind of both.
Yes, a little bit of both. This is also a precon commander, and this is one that like was super off my radar until you got it, Cole, and you started playing it.
Yeah, I really like this. This is a Murders at Karlov Manor precon. It's Nelly Borka, the Impulsive Accuser. She's Boros, a 4 mana total, 2 a red and a white. A human detective with vigilance. When she attacks, she suspects a target creature and then goads all suspected creatures. And whenever 1 or more creatures an opponent controls deals combat damage to 1 or more of my opponents, me and the controller of those creatures each draw a card. So I put this in as it's kind of Group Slug, it's kind of Group Hug in the sense that it makes the game go quicker by forcing combat. It acts as removal because I can suspect a creature that maybe, you don't want to swing with. a value piece that's integral to your board, and now I can force you to start swinging it, and hopefully it gets blocked and dies, along with the secondary effect there of the encouraging card draw if my opponents take damage. I'm calling that a group hug because it gives everybody the option of receiving card draw if they so choose. But with the forced combat, it's like you are going to attempt to receive that card draw, regardless of if you're keen on attacking or not. I think it's a great deck for increasing the speed of the game. Goad as a mechanic is, people do not like goad. They do not like getting goaded, and I do receive a lot of hate, I think, when I do play this deck. But it's you have to have a way to kind of come back at the end, because it's not a burn style group slug where you're knocking people down and hopefully their life totals are just low enough that you can win. It relies on your opponent's creatures to kind of deal the damage for you. And so a lot of the win cons there are mob rule style effects where you're gaining control of these goaded creatures, or in mob rule's case, all creatures, and you're able to swing them back out. But it hugs with the card draw. It helps people build up boards that you can then turn back into their face and take the win, usually when it's just you and one other person. I also really like this deck because I drew all these little fedoras to represent my suspected creatures. So I have a ton of little unique fedora tokens that I put on people's cards, and they always get a kick out of that.
I think it's more suspicious than a fedora.
Nothing's more suspicious than a fedora.
Can't trust those people.
It's a
Yeah.
precon, so this is a deck that I think is pretty good right out of the box, but it has a lot of room for improvement. The mana base is middling, and then there are a lot of awesome goad cards, but there's only a few that are good for this deck. And so it's a deck that you can change out 10 cards and have a very functional, very fun deck that speeds up the game and isn't too overbearing. Like nobody really has a problem with it until it's late.
Mine, I actually went into the group hug aspect with. Have you guys ever been or had the desire to play three-headed giant?
Where everybody teams up on one person?
Yeah.
No, that's arch enemy.
What's three-headed giant?
It's two-headed giant, but with three people on a team. Because I have the perfect three-headed giant commander for you. Or, you could play it in a regular pod, I guess, and have, multiple people as your friend. That's going to be Glunch the Bestower. So it's 1 green white for a non-blue jellyfish that's a 0/5 with flying. At the beginning of your end step, choose a player. They put 2 1/1 counters on a creature they control. Choose a second player to draw a card, and then choose a third player to create 2 treasure tokens. Now, it should be noted that you are only one player, so you can't be like, I choose me, and I choose me, and I choose me. So you do have to spread the love around. And then this commander also the effect downshifts as the game goes on. So when you've got 4 people, you just have 1 enemy that you're making. And then once you drop down to 2 people, the last effect drops off and so forth and so on. But the thought here is that you're giving everybody a little bit of different advantage. So you could say, well, I'm going to let you draw the card. Oh, you didn't get a land drop this turn? You can have 2 treasure tokens. I'm going to put my counters on Glunch, and now he's a 2/7 flyer. He's got a big butt, so he's going to block most of the things that will get sent your way. He's not really a removal target, so he just he lingers longer than you suspect. And just like all great group hug commanders, they linger too long, and then suddenly, once they're the threat, you go, oh, I should have removed that 5 turns ago. So it's just a fun kind of hands out different things. You can benefit yourself in however you want. So if you need the mana, you want to pump creatures, or if you want to draw cards, you can give yourself the best option, and then you can curry favor by giving out the other things. So it's a little bit of a group hug, a little bit of a politics game. It does kind of meet that classic group hug sense of how do I pull out the win? So you do need to make sure that you're not overpowering any one person. So I can't just go, you're constantly getting the counters when you've got the biggest creature threat on the board. So you do have to kind of pick and choose and politic a little bit. But super budget commander. It's in colors that let you manipulate any one of these things. So you've got stuff like, if I put 2 counters on something, well, there's a ton of options for me to triple or double my counter output, and suddenly Glunch becomes bigger and scarier than you'd ever think.
Yeah, it kind of feels similar to the Shadrick Silver Quill effect of like you get a couple things, you can be as heavy-handed with it or as light-handed with it as you want, but it gives you a lot of modality. It's not the same. Everybody's getting the same benefit. Everybody's tempo bell drawing a card. It
Mhm.
makes it a little more. You can cater your hug to help someone without pushing them through to a
Victory.
king-making
Yeah.
victory. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, it kind of gives you that kind
Uh,
of you can kind of, oh hey, what do you need in this moment? Tick, where it's like, okay, well,
mm.
you need the 1/1 counters, you want the treasures, you want to draw a card, what do you want there? And it kind of can lead to some good conversation. So I like that one as a politic commander
You
for
want a
sure.
Rolex? I got Rolexes.
You
Yeah, exactly.
want to buy
We're
a
cool, right?
sundial?
Watch the queen. Watch the queen. You got this. You got this.
You got
All right. Last but not least, and I think this is probably the newest, maybe archetype out of all of these. So then the last one we'll talk about today is hand manipulation. So this is going to be kind of an all-encompassing effect of anything that would manipulate your hand, whether that's drawing cards, whether that's discarding cards, cycling, wheels, doing things like top deck manipulation so that hey, if I can play or cast spells off the top of my deck, in a way it's hand manipulation because now I've added an extra card to my hand. And there's different things within that. So we've seen like the madness archetype kind of grow. So madness being you discard the card and you can cast it for a madness cost when you discard it. Spider-Man recently brought in mayhem, which is a very similar kind of effect. And this is one I think we've seen a lot of support for in the last year. So we saw some support in Aether Drift. We've seen support in Edge of Eternities. We saw some support, obviously, with like the villains and Spider-Man. And this is probably like the archetype that I would say has grown the most in the last year or two. And especially if you're like a newer player or a newer deck builder, it can also be kind of a scary archetype because you always think about, I want to add things to my hand and kind of take advantage of that by having extra spells. So the concept of like cycling away a card or going, I'm going to discard or I'm going to wheel even, and it's one thing to wheel when you've got nothing in your hand and you're going, I'm discarding nothing and I'm drawing 7 cards. It's a little different to go, okay, I'm okay getting rid of these 5 cards to draw 7 cards. So I think it's definitely something for a newer player or even a newer deck builder to just kind of be cognizant of. And when you're building this style of deck, realize that there's different ways of getting value out of that card other than strictly casting and getting the effect on the face of the card.
Yeah, like learning how to judge cost versus efficacy or whatever. Like is it worth it to spend your resources to take a chance or make a big risk? And you find that if your deck has enough good cards in it, usually if you're drawing more than 3, you're usually going to run into 1. Or if your deck is built for that, you get a chance to keep refilling constantly.
Yeah, and I think like the base card, I think a lot of people would think it would be like an Ash Barrens. It's probably like the pre-con card that most people would run across to kind of meet in somewhere in here.
Yeah.
Where it's a land that taps for 1 colorless, or you can pay 1 to like basic land cycle it. So even on something like that, you go, okay, do I want to get my land drop as this and use that mana, or do I want to put a mana sink into it to like color fix? So just something simple like that, you are making that decision of like, okay, what's the cost reward of playing this card versus discarding it for something else? So when you look at these kind of decks, you're looking at that just on a bigger scale. I want to discard 3 or 4 cards at a time. If it's the case of like a Nekazar deck you were talking about, Cody, you're going to try and wheel as much as possible because you want to, not so much the discard, but you want to draw as many cards out of it and go, okay, if I can windfall, draw 7 cards, well, I just did all that damage. Now I'm going to play another wheel that I just draw off that, draw another 7, So you've got stuff like that. You've got vampire decks that look at madness, where they're going, okay, if I discard this card, I can give myself madness for 0 this turn. I can cast the spell for free that way.
Yeah, I think this is a newer archetype for me to start playing as well.
Mhm.
And I think one of the most beneficial things for why a player should build one of these decks is because it just makes you decide. Like it really makes you really think about the cards. Like, okay, I built an Octavia Living Thesis. And once you get as many instants and sorceries in your graveyard as possible, I filled it with like cards that like let me look at the top 5, and like I got to put some in the graveyard, but put some into hand. And like that decision making in the moment just made me feel like it made me a better player, because I have to really sit down and go, okay, well, like if I toss these now, but I get these cards now, like in my hand for now, like the game is going to change drastically from what I've been doing the entire time. And I think those choices like really help you become a better player because it really makes you look at your deck in a new light, because you have to sit there and think about, okay, am I okay putting these cards in my graveyard or in exile forever and never seeing them again, with the hope that I'll get to see better cards down the line. And so doing that is just like, I think it just helps you really become a better brewer and a better player overall.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think so. You and I, we'll talk about this deck here in a second, because I know it's one of the commanders you picked. But you and I were both drawn to like a similar commander this year that came out for discard, and it's kind of like it's quickly climbing the ranks for me. And I'll rip the band-aid off. So it's Captain Howler, right? And it's quickly like climbed the ranks for me of like one of my favorite decks to play, because you get that feel that like each game's a little different. Because in game one, you look at your hand and you go, okay, I need to play this card. But in game two, you're like, okay, I need to discard this card because I need to trigger either Captain Howler's effect or something else I have on the board to, I discard this, and then I've got my, was it Memorial to Endurance or Monument to Endurance that I need to get 3 damage off on all my opponents. So it's nice in that it's like a super flexible deck, and it lets you kind of play around with like a different archetype that feels fresh, in a way that like a lot of archetypes kind of feel stale because you've seen like, okay, we've got Avatar: The Last Airbender coming up, and then we've got Lorwyn, all and stuff. How many, let's just say, is it artifact commanders are we gonna see come out in the next year? That you're just like, wow, it's another one of the same thing. This feels like newer, unexplored territory, so you see a lot more like variance in the card design.
Yeah, I feel like I had to like stop myself, because I was like every other week being like, oh, here's a new card I could put in this deck. Oh, here's a new card I could put in this deck. And I had to be like, no, Cody, you're gonna keep upgrading this deck forever. Like Captain Howard is a lot of fun. Like it's probably it's in my top 5 favorite decks I play right now, just because, like you said, every game is different. You get this, you're constantly thinking about the cards that are in your hand and like, okay, can I discard these because I want to get that buff right now? It leads to these like insane plays. Like we played in Magicka Atlanta, and I wheeled myself and drew like 10 cards and gave a creature plus 20, and I gave it an Ember Cleave to swing at you, and I was like, and then we got told to leave that area. But anyways. But it was just like those moments happen all the time in that deck, and it's just so cool.
No, like I actually just played it this weekend. Cole and I were over at some friend's house doing like our monthly kind of commander pod, and I went and discarded, I think, like 4 or 5 cards to a Ghostly Pilferer. So Ghostly Pilferer says, it's got a lot of text, but the very last line is discard a card, make it unblockable.
Yeah.
So I just discarded my whole hand to it, and then basically with Captain Howler, I ended up buffing it, and then I had I think it was Fear of Missing Out was also out there that gives you a second combat phase.
Yeah.
So I ended up swinging over for like 28 damage or something, 1 player unblockable, and it's just like, this is a card that otherwise would never ever be that kind of threat, but suddenly it's doing that. Captain Howler also lets you draw cards off of all those instances, so you're like refueling your hand to discard again. And I guess we should say, for those who haven't seen the card, so Captain Howler is 2 blue-red for a 5/4 Shark Pirate. It comes with a very cool ward cost, which is 2 mana and pay 2 life. And then whenever you discard 1 or more cards, target creature gets +2/+0 till end of turn for each card discarded this way. And whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, you draw a card. So that does stack. So if you were to have like 3 instances of discarding a card, like not all at once, but 3, like I discard a card, and then a separate effect, I discard a card. If that stacked on the same creature and hit, you would be able to draw 3 cards.
It's just so nice. Like it's and so like the way I built my deck is I made like a bunch of unblockable creatures in the deck, and so I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna get in for damage no matter what, so I'm gonna get to draw the card. So then it's really about looking for discard outlets. But I mean, in those moments, it kind of, because you're constantly thinking about, well, if I discard this creature and then there's a board wipe, oh, I'm not gonna have any creatures out, and then I'm kind of screwed. I'm set back. Oh, if I discard this mana rock right now, and then Howler gets destroyed, I'm behind because I got rid of the mana rock that would have propelled me forward, and now Howler's gone and costs more. So you're kind of constantly thinking about how to play the deck and what's the best like approach to like the next step of what your game plan is. And so it's really fun.
Yeah, I went for the like pirate sub theme. So I've got a lot of like Malcolms and stuff like that in there that also have discard synergy. So there's like I think it's Ghost of Ramiro di Pietro and stuff like that that have like discard synergy and also pirate synergy. So it plays off very well. And then you do also tend to use cards that you otherwise wouldn't see. So I've got like I think Circular Logic is in there, which is a counterspell with madness. So stuff that like you're never playing this in any other deck, but suddenly this like 20-year-old card has a home.
Yeah. That's always a good
So-
feeling is when you can find like kind of older cards to put into the decks that are newer.
Yeah, so it does give an opportunity to kind of like breathe life, having this new archetype. Now, that's what you came with. I will say that I am also a huge Captain Howler fan, but the one that I chose is Gavi Nest Warden, which was my very first precon. So Gavi is 2 in Jeskai for a 2/5 human shaman, and it lets you pay 0 for the first cycling you would do each turn. And then whenever you draw your second card each turn, it makes a 2/2 red-white dinosaur cat creature token, which is arguably the cutest creature token Magic has ever made. But this one's kind of fun because it lets you play around cycling in particular. So there's a lot of cards out there that have cycling, and there's a lot of cards out there that say, like, whenever you cycle this card, you get this effect. So it'll say, like, hey, you'll see a lot of spells that say, hey, here's what the effect is if you cast it, or you can cycle it and get, like, a lesser effect, or sometimes even a bigger effect. Well, this one's letting you do that for free, so you get to see a lot of, like, I'm discarding and I'm drawing this, and then you're getting effects that pop off that aren't really counterable. So there's like cycling counter spells. There's even a cycling board wipe that I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But you go and it will do a full-blown board wipe. Well, good luck countering my board wipe from hand that I'm not really casting. It's just an effect trigger. So it's like it's a fun deck. You do run into kind of the same thing where you go, okay, what do I want to cast? What do I want to swap out? A lot of times when you're cycling, you're getting other resources. So not only are you drawing that second card, which is almost a guarantee on every turn, but you're also getting other triggers like the backup commanders in this deck are Brawlin and Shabraz, which are the shark and the rider, where one says when you draw a card, you gain a life and it gets a counter, and one says when you discard a card, you ping everyone for 1 and you get a counter. So they kind of like they ramp up very fast as well. And it's just like it's that goofy, quintessential, like half discard, half draw kind of balance between the two sort of deck.
I think cycling also is just very underrated as a mechanic. That filtration, it lets you see so many cards and a little bit more consistent. You're going to be hitting your land drops a little bit more consistently.
I've actually heard, and this could be just rumor, that there was a hot take from somebody else on a different Commander podcast that they like cycling was not their thing.
Well, it's a cycle. It goes around and comes around. It's hot
What podcast
sometimes.
was that, Cory?
I just heard that like there was some guy named Cody that was like super anti-cycling.
All right, you tell Raul that was between me and him. Yeah, early on into Commander, I was just like, that's a terrible mechanic. Why would you ever use that? But now I really appreciate it.
It's like it smooths out your mana curve in a way because you go, okay, I don't need this card right now. Let me cast it aside. Like maybe now is not the time I need a board wipe. Let me throw it aside and get something fresh.
Yeah, I like the ability, like it kind of helps you choose, because in that moment it's like, okay, well, like I don't really need to cast this 5 mana spell, but for 2 mana, I could draw a card. Pretty good.
Yeah,
but like,
or it's like, do you hang on to it? So that 5 mana spell, you're like, oh, I don't need it now, but do I hold on to it for 3-4 turns just in case I need it? Nah.
Yeah, it kind of helps that kind of like, I say it helps, but it's that decision making of what the topic we're covering, guard manipulation. It's kind of just is part of that. So,
all right, Cody. There's too many like COs so far on this podcast. If we,
hey,
we're gonna have to nip this in the bud next time. Cole, bring us home. The last commander we're gonna be talking about today in the card manipulation era, we have Arjun, the Shifting Flame. So this is a spell slinger-y kind of hand manipulator.
It definitely doesn't have to be Spellslinger. It's a blue and a red and 4 colorless for a Sphinx wizard with flying. He's a 5/5. He's a little bit old school. It's hard to get a 6 mana commander, in play nowadays before the game's over. But he has an ability that says whenever you cast a spell, put the cards in your hand on the bottom of your library in any order, and then draw that many cards. So I used to have a buddy who had this deck back, when I first got into playing Commander, and it was just brutal. And it's a deck that has, I think, only gotten stronger over time. It does have the benefit of, like, you're going through that same experience of, I'm only going to cast one spell before I wheel pretty much everything away and am drawing a full new hand. So you are picking the best card in your hand every single time. You obviously can still play lands without this ability triggering, but all the cards that have come out in the last couple of years that care about drawing multiple cards, or whenever you draw your second card each turn, generate a value, or whenever you ominous seas, you get counters that you can then remove in exchange for 8/8 krakens, or Min the wily illusionist, who creates illusions that when they die you can put something from your hand onto the battlefield for free. So it's a maybe not a great deck for a new player, because you are having to make a lot of new decisions every time your hand gets wheeled away. But if you do play it with like Spellslinger in mind, you are able to respond to the trigger. You can you can get your instance out on other people, you essentially stack it up. You get multiple Arjun triggers. You just draw a boatload of cards, even if you're not necessarily getting card advantage because your old hand is going away. You get so many new cards to choose from that you're always getting the next best card in the top of 7 cards of your deck.
Sure.
You play with a lot of like draw spells as well to kind of mitigate that, because and you don't want to do too much draw, because you can find yourself getting decked out pretty quickly if you have any sort of like Teferi's Ageless Insight that's doubling your card draw. But it also gives you the option to win pretty organically with a Labman style effect of, if you have no cards in your library, you win the game. So I think it's a really fun deck when you know the cards in your library and you're kind of able to make those decisions on the fly. But it is probably difficult for someone who is newer to deck building to say, oh, I love all these cards. Which one should I choose? And but I don't want to get rid of these cards. Well, you're kind of locked into that with Arjun. But you're gonna have a fun time, drawing all those cards and picking the top choice in each hand. So I think it's a fun commander, a little bit more battle cruiser, but back 10 years ago, this thing was running tables.
All right. Well, there you guys have it. That is our 6 deck types that we think all new deck brewers should be given an attempt to build. Let us know down below in the comments if you think we were right, if you think we were wrong, if you think we were fools because Cody did not mention his deep-seated love for mill decks. Whether we're right or wrong, whatever the case may be, let us know down below. But that brings us to question of the week, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's episode. So question of the week, gentlemen. Is there a card that used to be expensive that you're happy to have seen reprinted to make it affordable? Or is there a card you would like to see get reprinted to become affordable? Cody, what do you got? What's something that was like once unattainably expensive? That was once like a Black Lotus that has now become ultra cheap, like not a Black Lotus.
I'm going to do a hot take here. And since it's so iconic and we can't ban it, I think Ristic Study should just be printed into the dirt so that every blue player can live their hearts of saying, do you pay the 1?
It kind of makes sense because like the other do you pays, like Mystic Remora is not that expensive.
Mhm.
I mean, Mothering Tithe is kind of creeping up there, but like is not in Ristic Study expensive range.
Yeah. Non-joking answer, I'm trying to think, like, I feel like a lot of the lands, like, I think they've done a good job of reprinting a lot of the lands. I still
But
think
Mana
that
Crypt is still bleeding dry.
a lot of the lands are still way too high price, and like they're the backbone of the game. Like, like they should, like the triomes. Why are we not reprinting the triomes? Why are we not reprinted any of the Capenna lands? Like things like that.
Right.
Like those are the kind of things I really want reprinted because like they're essential to like a lot of the game. So like just reprint them at this point,
Yeah, I mean, like everything that's 3 colors or more would love to have a triome in it.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. Especially the searchable ones, the ones that have like land types to them,
Yeah.
are creeping up there. But even I would say like the shock lands, right? Like the shock land is obviously not as good as like an OG dual land, but they're the closest that most of us will get in our deck.
Yeah.
So, why should I pay whatever $30 for like a scalding tarn or whatever, whatever the cost may be right now.
Yeah, I think those have gone down a lot since they've reprinted them in
Mhm.
like Tarkir, and then like I think Lore One's supposed to get the next batch. So they definitely gone down a lot, but I don't think we should ever see, those lands get that high. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Sure. Cole, what you got?
Similarly, I'd say kind of like it will sound crazy now, but the talisman cycle, little 2 mana ramp
Yeah.
or rocks that used to be like several dollars and are now
Yeah.
printed in every precon.
And easier.
But the card that initially came to mind is Phyrexian Arena. Remember when I first got into Magic, I was like, oh, I need a Phyrexian, which has now been power crept to, people are saying it's a bad card, which whatever you think about Phyrexian Arena aside, you can now get one for less than $1. And when I first got mine, I think it was like 15 or $20 or something crazy like that. So that's been a nice accessible card for sure.
I think it's crazy is like you do hear people say, "Oh, I think it's a bad card" or anything like that. I don't think it's a bad card, especially if I'm in like mono black. I mean, what else is getting me one card for one life guaranteed every turn? Like it's consistent. It does exactly what I want it to do. It's only 3 mana.
Yeah, the argument is that it doesn't do anything when you play it, and so it's a 3 mana do nothing spell until for a full turn cycle. And
Those are greedy players.
Or
Greedy.
else is a 3 mana or more do nothing spell. Every creature I cast that doesn't have haste or an ETB. So the first thing that popped into my mind was the medallions, kind of similar to like the talisman cycle, like the sapphire medallion and pearl and all those that are just the generic mana rock that reduce, like, all blue spells are reduced by 1. So when I first got into Magic, which again was not that long ago, like 5 years ago or so, I remember them being like super expensive. Like, man, these are unattainably expensive, and now they've reprinted them in recent years. So now you can get most of them for like $5, $6, depending on what color it is. Some of them are even like the $4 range. But to give you an idea, I actually looked this up just to confirm that this wasn't like, my mind playing tricks on me and I was misremembering something. So Sapphire Medallion, when I got into Magic, so Sapphire Medallion peaked in 2021 at $88.13. Now Sapphire Medallion, Sapphire Medallion is at $4.80 up to $6, kind of depending on the printing. I think the most expensive printing was like $10 or so on Scryfall. But to give you an idea, like an $80 card for something, I would say same as the Talisman, same as like Phyrexian Arena, same as pretty much every land. Like if I'm building a monocolor deck, I want it in there, and it's not such a crazy effect that this should be unattainably priced. So that's one I'm definitely glad to see crept down, and I think they should continue to reprint them before they ever have the possibility to creep up. And I feel the same way about like Lightning Greaves and all those, where they perpetually get to like $8-10 range, and then you want to see them loaded into a precon and like buried back down.
Yeah. I was really glad they reprinted them recently in Commander Masters. I want to say is when they reprinted them, because I was like, yeah, like looking. I think Ruby Medallion was like way up there, and I had looked up like get one for a dragon deck at one time, and I was like, I'm not paying $20 for a mana rock that just reduces stuff by 1. I'm good.
Yeah, I think other than the green one, Emerald Medallion, everything else was expensive. The green was just because everybody's like, I don't need artifact ramp in my green deck.
Yeah,
it is really good if you're casting a lot of small spells versus like, oh well, for the same price, you get a 1 mana dork. If you cast 3 spells, you're getting the value out of it.
All right. Well, this was a bit longer than expected episode, but that does bring us to the end of today's episode, the very end. So first off, thank you, Cody, for hopping in with us today, chatting about brewing, something that you may have a podcast that people want to check out that you brew decks on with your friend Laz. So if people wanted to find you, Cody, out in the broader spectrum of Magic, where could they hunt you down at?
Yeah, so like Cory said, first off, thank you guys so much for having me. It's always a blast to get on here and talk with you guys. You are like a second home for me, You can find me on Blue Sky, tweeting about magic and other things like my engagement that recently happened.
Ooh, congrats.
CTC, thank y'all. CTC MTG at bluesky.com. Combat Trick Cody is what I go by on there. My friend Laz and I do a podcast called Brew Review, where once a month we sit down. One of us has brewed up a deck, the other one looks at it, has played against it. We try to make it better, talk about like what's not working, what is working. And we just recently did an episode on Kratos and Atreus from the God of War PlayStation Secret Lair. It was a ton of fun. It's a deck I'm very passionate about. And yeah, we have a good little set of episodes coming out the next few months, so we're happy about that. So yeah.
Okay. Well, and I believe since we're talking about Kratos, the other place you can always find all of us is waiting in the secret lair queue for greater than an hour. But go ahead and check out Cody. If you want to follow the rest of us, you can find Cole on line at loveandmana.mtg on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky if he ever decides to post anything, or with me right here every Wednesday. You can follow me at Sleevecard, or you can follow the podcast directly at urcastpod or contact@urcast@gmail.com. That's where you can go to submit your question of the week. Card of the week, we should be bringing back here possibly next episode. So if you have any card of the week suggestions, go ahead and drop them down below as well. But with that being said, thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. Have yourselves a magical Wednesday, and we will see you next week.
Later.
Bye.